Hello guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures, and today we're going to be doing another episode of our Planet Zoo mod spotlights. This will be part 42, so we're going to go through a bunch of cool mods people have been making. Quite excited to get stuck into this one. So yeah, we're going to be starting today with a bunch of fishies like we did last time in part 41. We've got, starting off, the copper band butterfly fish by Seth, Buffzoo, and Beet. So we'll jump into there. We've got a pause, but we'll move into here. Oops, wrong one. There we go. No, wrong one still. That was a bit of a shaky start, but that's alright. Let's find it. There we are. These are our copper band butterfly fish. Wonderful little fishies. So these guys are also known as the beaked coral fish, and they are found in reefs in both the Pacific and Indian Oceans. And they're one of the three species that make up the genus Simolum, and all have these long beaks. So you can easily tell a copper band butterfly fish apart from other butterfly fish because they have this yellow banding that you can see here and this quite long snout. And the young appear quite similar to adult fish and grow up to about 20 centimeters in length. And the fish appears taller than its length because it has this very compressed body, along with these light dorsal and posterior fins that kind of just make it look like a board, which is pretty cool. And these guys are usually found in depths of 1 to 25 meters that are either alone or in pairs. And these form monogamous pairs during the breeding season, and they use coral reefs, where they found across the Pacific and Indian Oceans, and rocky shorelines, but also estuaries and silty inlet rivers in the reefs. And these guys are also territorial and oviviparous, I believe you pronounce it, or oviparous, which means they lay eggs. Oviviparous means when you keep eggs inside you. So these guys, as I mentioned, grow up to 8 inches or 20 centimeters long. Usually in home aquarium, they get about half that size. And they do well in normal reef tanks and aquariums with a size of about 25 gallons and plenty of live rock to graze on. So these guys are kind of omnivores, so they'll eat invertebrates, so they're tube-words things, and anemones as well. Also graze on algae. So they actually feed on a lot of different things, and many aquarists will include these guys in their reef tanks because they get rid of pests and given consideration for their long-term needs of survival, so a lot of people will keep them. And they are not recommended fish for inexperienced aquarists, and they require excellent tank conditions to thrive well. So that's pretty cool. Really, really wonderful. So these guys are also considered least concern. They're a common reef fish, but I believe they're easy to breed and doing quite well. Quite a cool fish. So yeah, the next one, we're moving on. We've got another cool fishy going on. This one was done by Buffzoo, GiornoPizza, and Archaea, so this comes from Endless Ocean. We have got here I believe it's called the Paraba, or the Paraba catfish, also known as the dark caped golden Goliath catfish, or the Paraba catfish, or the false Paraba. So these are a species of catfish. Their scientific name is Brachypletysoma capiterum, I believe they pronounce that, from the family Palmabellidae, which is native to watershed areas of Brazil and Peru. So quite common. They're very widespread and found in all these large river tuberties and lakes along the Amazon basin, from Brazil upwards into Peru. So they're quite big distribution and considered least concern, I believe. And they can grow to a length of about 1010 millimeters, so I believe that's about a meter long. And adults will show this strange counter shading with a dark greyish dorsum, as you can see here, and a white creamy ventrum. So that's the bottom here, you can see is quite creamy. Top is quite greyish. So that's a type of counter shading. And the caudal fin, as you can see here, is moderately forked, And juveniles tend to have this like bold, large, dark brown or grey spots that are centered along the lateral line. So they'll have these big, deep spots. And these guys are primarily fish eaters, so they eat primarily other fish, or are piscivorous. And found both in freshwater bethnopelagic communities, which live around muddy waters and deeper flowing channels. And the juveniles and adults of the species are migratory, so that means they move across all sorts of different areas. So yeah, really, really cool animal. I really like this guy. Let's see if we can find a baby. I believe the babies are just smaller. Oh, there's a baby there. Really a change in the colours that we see, but still really, really nice. See, that's 2 fishes down. That was done by Buffzoo, GiornoPizza, and Arkia. Next one was done by Seth, Buffzoo, and Bit Golem, not Buff Golem. So this is the next species. We've got the giant Moray Eel. So we have a look, see if you can find them swimming. There's one at the bottom there, having a good time. Clearly having a good time. So the giant Moray is a species of Moray Eel, and is a species of marine fish that is obviously in the Moray Eel family. And in terms of body mass, is the largest Moray eel. However, the slender giant Moray is longer, but these guys are heavier. So, being a giant Moray, they are quite giant. They are quite large. They reach to about 3 meters or 9.8 feet in length and weigh about 30 kilograms or 66 pounds in weight. And they have an elongated body that's brownish in color. While the juveniles are tan in color with large black spots, the adults have these kind of dark black bodies with the specks, so you can see here, almost like leopard-like spots behind the head. So it comes out looking really, really nice. Let's have a look at this one over here. Oh, that's not what I want to look at. I believe this is probably based on the hippo. I think they've changed the rig to move on alligator now and swim around, but it still looks really, really nice. So these guys are widespreadly found around the Indo-Pacific region, found from the eastern coast of Africa up into the Red Sea, Pitcairn Group, the Hawaiian Islands, all over Polynesia, and as north to south Japan, as also as New Caledonia, Fiji, and the Austral Islands. So found around there. So these guys are primarily carnivorous and nocturnal, so they hunt prey within the reef, and they've actually been known to engage in cooperative hunting with the roving coral grouper, where the two species will complement each other. So when the eel hunts in the reef, it may scare prey up out of the reef, and that is eaten by the grouper. Similarly, when the grouper is hunting above the reef, they may cause prey to seek a refuge in the reef, where the moray may ambush them. So it's a really cool symbiotic relationship they got going on. So the food that these guys mainly eat is fish and occasionally crustaceans. The moray eel is recently identified as a natural predator of the lionfish and its natural habitat in the Red Sea. And while a mature giant moray has few natural predators, they compete with other reef-dwelling sharks and enjoy the presence of cleaner wrasse, which are found in their presence. So, like other species of fish, the cleaner wrasse will climb in their mouths and clean them off, so make them all look nice and pretty. So where's the one off? Let's see if we can find another one. So this is based on the hippo, I think. We based the other one on the alligator, new rig. Yeah, these guys have also been shown to have very small octocentum volumes, so they have quite not very good eyes. So they primarily hunt through smell rather than their vision. And these can be quite hazardous to people. So, being at the top of the food chain, they exhibit biomagnification of harmful toxins. So basically, what they eat will have the toxins, and all of it will pile up into the top predators of the ecosystem. That can include morays, but also dolphins, whales, orcas, other large sharks. They can be quite toxic. And eating a giant moray, especially the liver, can cause illness, coma, or even death. And while this moray may bite if threatened, cornered, or in the presence of food, they are not usually aggressive. So they are not too bad to keep in aquariums, so that's good. And I believe I considered at least concerned. See, we don't have to worry about them too much. Really, really wonderful animals. How can you not love a giant moray? So yeah, now we're going to move on. That was done by Seth, Buffzoo, and Bit Golem. Next one, we've got the swordfish. So, really cool animal here, the Atlantic swordfish, I believe. You've got an adult here, see if we can spot one swimming around. Not quite yet. They're all coming for food now. Can't spot it, where is it? I'll just move one of these guys in. I can't put it in the water. Anyway, we'll just go ahead in the water. Silica's going ahead now. Anyway, so swordfish, also known as broadbills, are these very large migratory predatory fish that is quite similar to marlin. They are characterized by this really long, flat-pointed bill, as you can see here, and they are popular sport fish in the billfish category, although they're quite elusive. And these swordfish have elongate, rounded bodies and lose all their teeth and scales in adulthood, and they are frequently found widely across tropical and temperate waters in parts of the Atlantic Ocean, Pacific, and Indian Oceans, and are generally found near the surface of a depth of about 550 meters, or 18,000 or 1,800 feet, but exceptionally up to depths of 2,234 meters. And their common general weight is about 3 meters or 10 feet in length, but a maximum recorded length for these guys is about 4.55 meters or 14 feet 11 inches, and about 650 kilograms or 1,430 pounds in weight. So, as I mentioned, they get quite big. They reach this maturity at about 4 to 5 years old, even though the maximum age is believed to be at least 9 years old when they reach maturity. The oldest swordfish found in a recent study was a 16-year-old female and a 12-year-old male, so that's quite old. And you can see this because they have from annual rings in the fin rays rather than in otoliths, which are used for other species because they have quite small size in the species. And what's really also cool about these guys, they are endothermic, however, which is cool. They, along with some species of shark, there's some species of shark and fish that have managed to kind of evolve endothermy. They have special organs near the eyes that heat up their brains, and the temperatures of their brains can be about 10 to 15 degrees above the surrounding water, with the temperature being measured, and this heating of the eyes greatly improves their vision and consequently their ability to catch prey. So it basically supercharges their brain so they can process things faster, which is pretty cool, especially with the contemporary species that probably aren't. They have to deal with their environment as it is. And out of the 2,500 plus species fish known, only 22 have evolved this mechanism, which includes the swordfish, some sharks, marlin, and tuna, which is pretty cool. So, when these guys breed, they breed in the North Pacific, or the North Atlantic, they breed in northern areas. They will typically occur in warm waters with about 24 degrees Celsius during the spring and summer, and year-round in equatorial Pacific, so it just depends if it's good weather. In North Atlantic, their spawning is known as the Sangroso Sea, with warm water warmer than 23 degrees and less than 75 meters deep. And the spawning will typically take place in the North Atlantic, or South Atlantic around November to February in southern Brazil. And spawning is year-round in the Caribbean Sea and other warm areas of the West Atlantic. So large females can carry more eggs than females, smaller females. And between 1 million to 29 million eggs have been recovered from these females, so that's pretty interesting. These pelagic eggs measure about 1.6 to 1.8 millimeters in diameter, and 2.5 days after fertilization, the embryo development occurs. The surface living and unique larvae are about 4 millimeters long as hatching, and their bill evident when they reach larvae, and they reach about a centimeter long, so that's when they start to get their bill. Really, really cool animals. So, in terms of predators, food, they eat a wide range of food. So they eat pelagic fish, such as mackerels, barracudas, rockfish, herrings, lanternfish, squid, and crustaceans as well. And actually, in the northwestern Atlantic, there was a survey, and they found that 82% of the animals surveyed had eaten squid, and 53 had eaten fish, which include gabbids, butterfly fish, bluefish, and sandlines. So that's pretty interesting. And as I mentioned, these guys are kind of a very, very popular fish for like long lines, good eating, also a sport fish. So there's been local bans on sort of sword fishing, and local bans, not necessarily local bans, but also restrictions so people can hunt them sustainably, and also are a good food. And these guys are also, as I mentioned, I believe they're considered least concern. Let me check. Yeah, least concern. They're threatened in some areas, but there have been really good efforts in place to regulate their populations. So they usually take campaigns to people to try and stop them fishing so much, so it's kind of a recreational thing. Plus, being the big predator, naturally don't live as many as them. So they're believed to have recovered in a lot of these places with increased catches and unit catches and bag limits that really helps make sure these guys don't get too low so that the population is stable so people in further generations can manage to get their own swordfish, but also they can perform their role in the ecosystem, so they are being managed. And luckily, even in 2010, Greenpeace added their swordfish to the seafood red list, but I think that might change with some good regulations. Generally, a lot of fisheries are overfished, but as long as we manage to regulate them a bit better, we should be fine. But yeah, really, really nice animal. That was done by Buffzoo, GiornoPizza, and Jen, so Jen Bubbly One. So that's a lot of mouths, a lot of people there. A lot to say. Really, really awesome job on the swordfish. So now we're going to move on to next. We've got a bird next. So this is by Ron May Ron. A really nice bird we've got going on. So this is the Australian bush turkey, also known as the goila or the scrub turkey. It's a common, widespread bird that is a mound-building bird, which is quite cool. They're found across eastern Australia, from far north Queensland to the south coast of New South Wales. So quite diverse. Also been introduced on the Kangaroo Island of South Australia, and it's the largest living member of its family, which one of the 3 species that have in Australia. So these guys are a pretty large bird. They get a total length of about 60 to 75 centimeters, or 23.5 to 29.5 inches, and a wingspan of 85 centimeters, or 33 inches. So there's a few different subspecies. They're not too different from each other, just different colors and wattles. So you can see this is based on the nominate subspecies, where they have a prominent fan plate and tail, and they have a black plumage with a bare red head and a yellow wattle. But in the other subspecies, it can be a purple wattle. And they often swing side to side, and they use these heads and wattles get much brighter during breeding seasons and nesting seasons. And they will kind of use these feathers to kind of display and stuff. And they're actually quite clumsy as well. They cannot fly that long distances, and they only take to the air when threatened or to roost in trees during the heat of the day. So these guys are quite famous. We'll find a female here. So these guys are quite famous for building these large nests, and they can build out of materials such as leaves, earth, and other compostable materials about 1 to 1.5 meters high and up to 4 meters across. So this mound building is done by the dominant male and is visited by a succession of local females to mate and egg lay. So the males will work tirelessly on these nests, making materials, also fighting off rivals to keep his position. And the effort involved eventually wears him down, and then he'll be ultimately defeated by a new king, sadly. So the eggs are very large, and the young will be born fully fledged on hatchling, so pretty much ready to go. They're precocial. They can fly within hours, and as soon as their feathers are dry, so that means once their feathers are dry, they can fly off. And these eggs are hatched by the heat of the composting mound, and the temperature of which is regulated by adding and removing material, so they maintain it at a temperature of about 33 to 35 degrees during that temperature range. And the Australian bush turkey will actually check the temperature of their nests by sticking their beak in the mound. And like some other reptiles, this is really, really interesting. The incubation temperature affects the sex ratio of the chicks, but the mechanisms is different between the reptiles and these bush turkeys. So within reptiles exhibiting temperature sex determination, and megapodes having this mortality. So the sex ratio in bush turkeys is equal in the incubation of temperatures about 34 degrees, which result in more males when it's cooler and more females when it's warmer than that. So when the parents use this to manipulate the sex of their offspring, for instance, particularly the nesting according is unclear, though warmer incubations always result in heavier, fatter chicks, and others is linked to their sex is unknown. So that's a pretty cool thing. So the same nesting site is typically used year after year, and the old nests being added to by each breeding season. So the average clutch of eggs for these guys also is about 16 to 24 large white eggs, and are laid between late September and March. And sometimes up to 50 eggs have been laid by several females in a single mound. And these eggs are roughly placed in a circle, roughly 60 to 80 centimeters down and 20-30 centimeters apart, and all end up always in a large end up. And the newly hatched young will dig themselves out of the mound and basically go out and take care of themselves, which is pretty interesting. So let's have a look at these little babies. These ones, I believe, are albinos, or albino babies. Have a look at these wonderful little guys. So these guys are actually a favourite food for a lot of different animals, such as snakes, goannas, dingoes, and dogs. And they were actually a staple for the Aboriginal Australians. That's what they eat. And in situations where they come into contact with humans, such as suburban gardens, they often exhibit little fear of people and will boldly attempt to steal foods and raid compost bins. And bush turkeys in more urbanised areas have been shown reduced fears than birds compared to national parks. And they nest in suburban gardens where they use the mulch to kind of make their nests. So that's also pretty cool. So these guys generally live in rainforests and wet forests in general, but can be found in dry scrubs and open areas. In the northern part of their range, they're most common in higher altitudes, but individuals move to the lowland areas in the winter, and in the south they found in both mountain and lowland areas. So luckily they do seem to be quite common, especially in urban areas, and are fairly common. There haven't been much declines. They are considered least concern, I believe, yep. And these guys, generally they feed upon insects, seeds, fallen fruits as well, but exposed by the raking through the leaf litter and trying to find open logs and ripping things apart looking for food. So they're quite generalist in that regard. So these guys have also kind of prosecuted because they damage gardens when they rake up for their food and cause damage to crops. And they are sometimes hunted for food, and especially their eggs are taken, but luckily they are protected in some areas, especially Queensland. You can actually get paid for a Class 4 offence. You get paid $13,000, so you have to pay a fine. And in New South Wales, shooting a bush turkey results in fines of up to 22,000 Australian dollars under the Biodiversity Conservation Act. So, interesting. So you can't shoot these guys, but they are wonderful. I do like a good bird. How can you not like a good bird? Really, really wonderful. Ron Mayron, or Rihanna, who made these, did a wonderful job. She always does a good job with her birds. So now we're going to move on to the next animal here. We've got the Stenbock by Jen Bubblyworms, or just Jen. And Leaf, I believe, ported it as well. So we've got another cool animal going on. So, yeah, where is it? There they are. So, this is a Stenbock, which is a common small antelope that's found in southern and eastern Africa, also known as a Steinbuck or a Steinbock, or the Steenbok. So these guys resemble a small aubrey, so they're not a very particularly big antelope. They're pretty small. They stand about 45 to 60 centimeters at the shoulder and average about 12 kilograms. And you can see they have this, their pelt, or their coat, is kind of any shade of kind of fawn to rufous, so typically rather orange on the underside with a light belly and chin and things like that. And the ears, you can see, are quite large with finger marks on the inside. And let's see if you can find a male. There's got to be a male in here. He's sitting here on a drink, is he? You can see they got these small horns, about 17 to 19 centimeters long. And yeah, really, really cool regardless. So they are found in two distinct clusters, basically around East Africa, where they occur in Kenya and northern Tanzania, and are formerly widespread through Uganda, but pretty much considered extinct there. And southern Africa, they occur in Angola, Namibia, South Africa, Eswatini, Botswana, Mozambique, Zambia, Zimbabwe, and possibly Lesotho, which is pretty cool. And they live in a variety of habitats, from semi-deserts, such as the edge of the Kalahari Desert and Estonia National Park, open woodlands and thickets, including savannas, pretty much whatever habitat they can get around. And they're said to favour unstable or transitional habitats, so they kind of like to do their own thing. They're kind of like those habitats. And at least in the central parts of the Kruger National Parks, they show a distinct preference for acacia tree savannas throughout the year, and they're a tendency to migrate to most moist areas during the dry season. They also live in densities of about 0.3 to 1.0 individuals per kilometre, so reaching about 4 stenbocks per kilometre in optimal habitats. So these guys are also browsers, so they typically browse on low-level vegetation, when they also like to scratch up roots and tubers, And pretty much they will also take fruits and very rarely graze on grass, but they're typically more browsers, where they get their moisture that they need from their food. So these guys are also to avoid predators. They are active in the day and the night. However, during hotter periods, they rest under the shade. And they spend their time in the night increases during the dry season, where they're resting and grooming. They also sleep really. And another cool thing about defending themselves from predators, they will, first sign of trouble, they'll typically lie in low vegetation. And if a predator's perceived threat comes closer, they'll leap away and have a zigzag pattern where they try to shake off the pursuer. And escaping standbok have been frequently stopped to look back, and flight and agitated and kind of just run away. They've also been known to take refuge in aardvark burrows, and these guys are known to be preyed on by southern African wildcats, caracals, jackals, leopards, eagles, and pythons. So that's also pretty cool. So typically these guys are solitary, except when their pair has come together to mate. However, it has been suggested these pairs will occupy consistent territories while living independently, and they'll stay in contact using marking to know where their mate is the most of the time. So scent marking for these guys is typically done through dung middens, and the territories will range from 4 hectares to 1 square kilometre, and the males get really, really aggressive during a female's estrus. So engaging in this like buff and bluster type displays with rival males, where they'll prolong contests where they will find these well-matched individuals, usually in their prime. And breeding occurs typically throughout the year, although most fawns are born in November to December in the southern spring, summer, and some females may breed twice a year, just depending. Gestation period is about 170 days, with one single precocious fawn is born, where they're basically ready to go right out the box. The fawn is kept hidden in vegetation for about 2 weeks, when they suckle for about 3 months. And the female becomes sexually mature at about 6 to 8 months old, and the males become sexually mature at about 9 years old. And they have been known to live to 7 years or more. So yeah, really, really cool guys. They're considered least concern, quite common. Really, really wonderful animal. So that's the male, and there's the female here. A bit banged up, but quite pretty. So yeah, I think they did a really good job. Jen always does a good job with her animals. I think she just learned about this animal and then decided to make it. And it's really cool that we get to give antelopes and animals that don't get much love some love here. It's a really cute little animal, I think. So now, moving on to some primates, or some prime apes. We have got the Mongoose Lima that was made by Leaf. So really, really wonderful. Let's have a look over here. So this is the male, I believe. Yep. So the Mongoose Lima is a small lemur that is native to Madagascar and has been introduced on the Comoros Islands. So they typically range from about 12 to 18 centimeters, or 30 to 46 centimeters, plus a tail that's about 16 to 25 inches, or 41 centimeters to 64 centimeters. With both sexes are born with like a white beards, but they become sexual dimorphic at about 6 weeks of age, where the females, well, the males will develop red beards and red cheeks, as you can kind of see here. That's a male here. It's a juvenile or adult. The males will develop these red cheeks, as you can see here, and red beards. While the females, is this a female or male? Female. Wrong. I think it might be wrong one. The males will develop these red beards and cheeks, and the males will also have lighter faces than the females. Yeah, the female should have the light colours. I think that might be the wrong way around. Interesting. Whatever. We'll just keep carrying on. The males will have lighter faces than the females, and the males may firmly distinguish themselves with scent marking, where they use the bald patch over their head for rubbing. So yeah, really, really cool. Let me just check if that's actually right. I might have got it wrong. So yeah, that's red, and that's a male. So the females have the white. So I think Leaf got the sexes the wrong way around. But anyway, we'll just have a look at the female. So these guys live in dry deciduous forests on the island of Madagascar and the humid forests of the Coromos, where they've been introduced. And they're actually one of 2 lemurs found outside of Madagascar, though it's an introduced species in the Coromos. And I believe there's a population of ring-tailed lemurs on an island in the US. But I don't know too much about that. So these guys are pretty generalist. We'll move over here. Hold up here. So one second right there. Let's move on. Yeah, the 6 is the wrong way around. But anyway, the Mongoose Lima mostly eats fruits through flowers, leaves, and nectar, also make up part of their diet. As such, they're considered pollinators and seed dispersers, where they use their ability to kind of propagate the forest. Very, very important. They also will feed on grubs, and they're usually unusual around primates because they are nocturnal, depending on the season, with being most active during the day in the wet season, and they become more active at night during the dry season. They're also quite arboreal, and they have the ability to jump several meters between trees, and they live in these small groups, family groups, usually consisting of a bonded pair and 1 or 3 offspring. And these groups really encounter one another, but when they do, it can be quite aggressive. Young are born just prior to the raining season from August to October, and gestation lasts about 4 months, and weaning takes place for about 5 months after the young is born, and the offspring usually stay with their parents until 3 years of age, or when they have reached sexual maturity. So they also have seasonal habits. Their breeding and eating and activity is largely dependent on the seasons, with mongoose usually conceive their offspring during October, and they present as nocturnal during the dry season and diurnal during the wet season. So that's also pretty cool. So that's, yeah, I'm just making triple sure. The female should have the white, and this is technically a male, so I think Leaf got them the wrong way round, but don't need to point that out too much. So these guys can live up to 26 years in captivity. Let's find a baby to talk to. Look at these little cuties. Look at this little cute guy. Really, really wonderful. So, captive mongoose lemurs can live for up to 26 years, with wild specimens living between 18 to 20 years. And they're threatened in the wild. They're considered critically endangered because of destruction of their habitat, which is a big issue for a lot of animals in Madagascar, and the fragmentation as well of where they're hunting. Their numbers have dwindled about 80% of what they were over the past 25 years, and they've rated them critically endangered because of this, because they are at serious risk of extinction. Still really wonder animals regardless. Look at these wonderful little boys. So yeah. Very, very interesting. So yeah, we got that was done by Jen and Bubbly Wums. And Leaf. No, that was the Stenbock. Just Leaf did the Mongoose Lima, but the next one was done by Jen and Leaf. We have got the common Genit. Oh, I've been a bit lackluster today. But anyway, we'll get stuck onto it. Really, really powering through these episodes. There they are. So this is the common Genit. Let's get a better look at the one moving about. It's a really cute little guy. So the common Genit is a small vivarium indigenous to Africa, but has then been introduced into the Baltic Islands and southwestern Europe, and is widely distributed across the north of Sahara and savanna zones, such as the south of Sahara and southern Africa, also found in the coasts of Arabia, Yemen, and Oman, and is considered least concern. So they have this quite slender, cat-like body, the small head and a pointed muzzle, so they kind of look like a mix of a cat and a dog, with these short claws that they can retract. And they have quite dense fur with a pale grey coat and all these different markings, which helps break out their outline with these dark spots. They've got striped tails that can be between 8 to 13 rings along its length. And their body length is between 43 and 55 centimeters, or 17 to 22 inches, with a 33 to 52 centimeter or 13 to 20 inch long tail, with males weighing on average of 2 kilograms and are about 10% larger than the females. And they have an erectile crest of hair through the shoulders and the base, as you can kind of see here. Don't know what you're doing around here. And they have these white tail tips and black hind feet, as you can see. So as I mentioned, they are pretty common around the Western Mediterranean, found in Senegal as well, pretty much found all over Africa. There's kind of Yemen and Oman, the Middle East, also lots of parts of Central Africa, and also populations in South Africa. And the introduced population lives in mainly Spain, and I believe a bit of France as well, and Switzerland have been sighted. And these guys are solitary, but also nocturnal or crepuscular. That means they either come out during sunset or midnight or just prior to sunrise. They don't like coming out during the day. Juveniles may be active during the day though, and they rest during the day in these hollow logs and thickets wherever they can find space, and they use these sites frequently. The ranges of males and females will overlap, and in southern Spain, the home ranges can be 7.8 kilometers per individual, and it just depends. And both male and females will scent mark their home ranges, so the female will mark their territory using scent glands on their flanks, hinds, and the like, and the males will mark less frequently than the females, with often spraying urine rather than using these scent glands, and they do so primarily during the breeding season. And they have a bunch of different calls that they use. They have a hiccup call that's used by the males during the mating period, and the female called the litter. And kits will purr for their first week of life, and depending on dependent weeks, they will moan or mew, which is pretty cute. They have all sorts of different sounds, and genets will utter a click when they feel threatened, and they will also use the crest. They'll take like an arch-back stance, they'll bare their teeth, and kind of just look threatening and make these clicking sound when they feel threatened. So they have also quite a varied diet. They will feed on small mammals, lizards, birds, and their eggs, amphibians, centipedes, millipedes, scorpions, insects, fruits as well, including figs and olives, and they'll often feed on things like wood mouse, red squirrels, and dormice. But yeah, pretty much eat whatever they can. And in Africa, they're fed on leopards, servals. They were fed on by leopards, servals, caracals, rattles, and large owl species. So also, these guys will also breed in Spain. It seems that they will breed in January to February, with a peak in February to March, and another one in the summer. So mating behavior and development of young has been studied in captive individuals, where copulation usually lasts about 2 to 3 minutes. And after a gestation period of about 10 to 11 weeks, up to 4 young are born, and newborn common genets can weigh between 60 to 85 grams, or 2.1 to 3 ounces. And they start eating meat about the first 7 weeks of age, and they are fully weaned at about 4 months old. And once they reach about 5 months old, they are skilled in hunting on their own. And when about 19 months old, that's when they start marking and become sexually active about 2 years old. So that's kind of the gross life. So about 2 years old, that's when they move out and do their own thing. So luckily they are considered least concerned. They're very, very common across Africa and Middle East, on the coast of Yemen and all that. And also introduced into Spain and France, I believe. And luckily there's no really big threats to them. Though there are some localities such as North Africa and parts of Southern Africa, they are hunted for fur. And in Portugal, they get killed in predator traps. And in Ibiza, the urbanization and development of infrastructure causes a loss of habitat for these guys, sadly. But are still considered quite common. So another really cool animal, and Jen did a wonderful job with these guys. So now we're going to move on to our lucky last animals. We're kind of doing a speed round today. Feeling good, feeling good. So we've got our last animal here today. We have got Glyptodon. This is done by Leaf and Johnny V. So Leaf probably just bought it. Johnny V made this. A really, really good job regardless. I think it came out really well. So Glyptodon is a whole genus. The species itself is Glyptodon capes, I believe, calaves, or really pronounce it. This is Glyptodon, which names means grooved or carved tooth. So this is a genus of these really large armored mammals related to armadillos that lived during the Pleistocene. These guys got very, very large. These guys got to the size of a Volkswagen Beetle, so about 800 to 840 kilograms. And they are quite famous for having this really cool rounded shell with spot legs and a bony shell that kind of looks very superficially like a turtle or a tortoise, and also like ankylosaurs. So that's a really cool visual aid for convergent evolution. And they actually did some studies on the genetics of these guys, and it's found that these guys are related to... They are nested within modern armadillos, and they form a sister group with a lot of the really cool little fairy armadillos and things like that. So I think that's really, really cool. Really did a wonderful job there. So these guys were said to be first found by Darwin, but the first mention of the Glyptodon was in George Cuvier's books, his first edition of the Osmins Fossilis, I believe he pronounced that. where there have been species described ever since. And really, really cool. There's a bunch of different species. So they belong to the Xenarthrans. So they are related to anteaters, tree sloths, armadillos, extinct ground sloths, and pumpathirs, which were another extinct group of armadillos. It's funny how the tongue comes out, just because they're based on the aardvark. But these guys originated in South America, and their remains have been found in Brazil, Uruguay, and Argentina. And different species are found in different areas, though a lot of these species are quite poorly defined, just because we don't have enough good mythology. And their habitat ranged all sorts of forested areas, from subfossil and warm and humid areas, and some had lived in cold areas where grasslands are more common, depending on also the species and populations and such. It really just depends. Look at the little babies, they're cute. And also during the Great American Biotic Interchange, where there were a bunch of migrations through North and South America, Glyptodon managed to migrate into Central America as far as Guatemala, and the closest related genus, Glyptotherium, actually reached the southern region of the modern US about 2.5 million years ago. So that's really, really awesome. Let's have a look at the baby. So there's kind of two main groups of Glyptodon have been distinguished from their feeding habits. So there's the smaller sized early Miocene kind of Papilopelophids, I believe that's pronounced. It's a really long name. Have these narrow muzzles, while the later post-Miocene, like Glyptodon here itself, was selective, had these wider muzzles. And the smaller ones were selective feeders, so they were eating more selective food. And while the later and larger Glyptodons, like Glyptodon cavies, that I believe is here, would have became much more generalist, so they kind of just ate as much as they could. So that's another really cool thing about these guys. And it seems like they graze near water sources and such as rivers and lakes, where they based on stable isotopes, so they can tell like where they forage and such. And it's evident in their diets contained a lot of trees and grasses, so clearly just eating whatever they could near lakes. They seem to like wet habitats. And they believe that these would have taken place in intra-Pacific fighting, so between other Glyptodons. So zoologists also presume that since the tail was very flexible, as you can see, bony ridges and such, they would have used it as weapons. And a close relative of this guy, Didacurus, had like a tail club, so it's very likely they could have used that, similar to like in Chylosaurs, where they use it to bash each other as kind of a way to show off who's the biggest and baddest, which is really cool. So Glyptodon measured about 3.3 meters or 11 feet in length and about 1.5 meters in height or 4.9 feet, weighed about 2 to 3 tons. And you can see this huge carapace that they got here with the osteoderms. So that was used for protection and helped protect them. And they have all these little osteoderms in these rows across their carapace. That's the technical term for it. And they also have this this is definitely a later Glyptodon. It's got a quite deep skull and a wide skull with a wide mouth that allows them to graze more effectively. And they've got these bony ridges across the tail that allowed it to be flexible, so they could have whacked each other with it, as I mentioned. And also they've been... seems that Xenarthrans would have mostly been active or used their vision at night during twilight while they're in their burrows. So it seems that these guys may have had color blindness and low vision, and it seems that's potentially why they adapted kind of the carapace, because they had issues with seeing things, which is pretty cool. But also, they lived at an interesting time in prehistory where they were hunted by all sorts of different animals. There's been evidence, I believe, of Glyptodons hunted by jaguars, but there have been they were preyed upon by animals such as Smilodon and Homotherium, also giant short-faced bears, Arctotherium, direwolves, and terrorbirds. And like other megafauna, these guys would have become extinct at the end of the last ice age, or potentially the early Holocene, with one of their relatives, Didacurus, did. And that's a very, very complicated extinction. It's most likely had a bit of climactic change also with humans coming around that could have greatly impacted the extinction. But yeah, it's really sad that we lost this animal, but really, really cool animal regardless. And Johnny V and Leaf both did a good job on this. So yeah, I think this is going to be a great place to end the video. So yeah, I really, really Really hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you guys like and subscribe. Always remember to hit the little bell icon to get notified when I upload anything. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you guys like and subscribe, and bye-bye.